Hi everyone, it's Melissa. And since it is the latter part of October, I am in the scary book frame of mind. So I wanted to talk about the story that kickstarted my love of scary stories. That is the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is a short story published in 1892. And before I talk about the story itself, I wanted to frame this in my own personal context and talk about the first time I read the story as a child. And then I can contrast that to a recent reread I did of the story as an adult who now understands the themes and commentary of the story. So let's talk about the first time I read The Yellow Wallpaper. I was 11 or 12 years old, so I was just out of elementary school. And for reference, the things I had read up until that point were very juvenile, very innocent, I guess you could say. So I had read the Anne of Green Gables series, some of the Little House on the Prairie books. I had read like Charlotte's Web and Bridge to Terabithia and like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So that should give you a flavor of my reading up until that point. Now, one of my older brothers had like this collection of short stories that were like ghost stories or spooky stories or whatever. And for whatever reason, I was just in a mood where I was very much wanting to, I don't know, prove to myself, I guess, that I was now an adolescent. I was no longer a child and I could watch certain shows and read certain things. So one night I grabbed this book and found a flashlight and put my covers over my head and I read The Yellow Wallpaper. And I could not sleep for the rest of the night. Now, as an 11 or a 12-year-old reader, I took the story pretty much at face value. I literally thought it was a story about a woman who sees a ghost woman or demon woman literally trapped behind wallpaper. And it was terrifying. I used to see this like woman creeping around the walls of my room late at night after reading this story. So that was my initial experience reading this story. What do I think of the story now? So I reread The Yellow Wallpaper a couple of months ago, and now I understand the feminist overtones and the like commentary on women's mental health and the commentary on just the treatment of women in general at this time. And of course, I no longer see this as a ghost story. So it wasn't scary to me in the same way that it was when I was a child, but the imagery of the woman kind of trapped behind the wallpaper still was very creepy. So what's actually going on in this story? I am going to give a spoiler-free kind of overview of the story. So there are only 4 characters in The Yellow Wallpaper, and 3 of them are really only mentioned in passing here and there. The main character is the unnamed narrator. She is a woman who has recently given birth, who has recently become a new mother. And the entire story is told through her like diary entries. She has been ordered to a period of rest by her husband, John, who is a respected doctor. So she and John are staying at this like remote estate so that the narrator can have a period of rest for her nervous exhaustion. And I should mention that at this time, so-called rest cures were pretty often prescribed by doctors for women who were suffering like mental health issues. So the only other characters are 2 women who are there to kind of take over the tasks that the narrator cannot do because she's undertaking this rest cure. So we have Mary, who is a nanny who is there to take care of the new baby. And we also have Jenny, who is John's sister, and she is there to manage the household and also to take care of the narrator. And by take care, that also includes making sure that the narrator is heeding doctors/husband's orders of not doing anything and of resting. So the narrator's rest cure is happening in the old and slightly run-down nursery of this manor. And this nursery is decorated by this yellow wallpaper that the narrator finds really ugly and just kind of gets on her nerves. She hates everything about the wallpaper. She hates the color. She especially hates the very busy pattern that she finds almost kind of nauseating. And as the narrator is undertaking her long rest period in this room, she becomes obsessed with the wallpaper. She spends hours and hours following and tracing the pattern. And then during the nighttime, she begins to see a woman behind the pattern of the wallpaper creeping around, and the pattern starts to look like bars, keeping this woman prisoner. So she watches the woman creep around the room, occasionally shaking at the bars to get out. Towards the end of the story, the narrator starts to peel parts of the wallpaper back to see if she can help the woman, and eventually starts tearing off huge swaths of the paper to free the woman caught in the wallpaper. And I won't spoil the ending of the story in case you would like to read it. So there is the obvious theme of confinement in this story. The narrator is not allowed to do anything during her confinement. She can't write in a journal, even though she does in secret. She just has to rest in this room for months on end. And we might even assume that this could be a cause of her continual decline in mental health and eventually her hallucinations. And that creeping woman, of course, is kind of like that mirror reflection of the narrator's own feelings of confinement. And by tearing out the wallpaper, she's almost trying to set herself free in a way as well. Although we don't really know what the narrator's nervous condition is, given the fact that she just had a baby, it could be that she's suffering from postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, or some similar mental health issue. But I'm sure her months-long confinement did nothing to help her mental condition. And it is really infuriating as a modern reader that the things that might help her mental state, like some freedom, being able to walk the grounds, being able to write in her journal, being able to hold and care for her baby, conversations with other people, some sort of creative or intellectual outlet, those are the very things that she is forbidden from doing. And another theme that's explored here is the forced conformity to gender roles. So the narrator is not trusted to make decisions for herself and has to abide by whatever her husband/doctor decide for her. And during this time in history, it was not uncommon for women to be prescribed confinement, these rest cures, whenever they were suffering from a mental health crisis or were assumed to be suffering. Women also were prescribed rest cures for kind of like changes in their behavior or things that were deemed like troublesome behaviors, aka maybe like disagreeing with their husbands. Oh, you have a difference of opinion? You dissent? You must be suffering from a nervous condition. Better lock you up in a small room for 4 months. That will cure you. Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote the story as a commentary to women's roles in society at this time. She wanted people to see that these treatments, these confinements, the lack of creative outlets, the lack of intellectual pursuits for women were actually harmful for women's mental health. And the author unfortunately spoke from experience. So she had been put on a rest cure at the insistence of her doctor when she was suffering likely from depression, although her doctor would have diagnosed her with hysteria at the time, a condition which doesn't exist. So during her rest cure, the author's mental health declined dramatically, and she was driven to near insanity during that time. Sometime later, she wrote the Yellow Wallpaper, and she sent a copy of the story to the very doctor who prescribed her the Rescuer, which is all sorts of awesome. If you haven't read the story, I highly recommend it. And while it's not necessarily a ghost story like I thought it was when I was a child, it still has the right kind of mood, I think, for this time of year, especially if you're someone who doesn't like straight up horror or things that are overtly scary. So this is the story that kickstarted my love of reading horror and scary books. Please comment below the book that got you started reading horror. Or if you read the Yellow Wallpaper, please comment below and share your thoughts, what you thought of the story. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.